Welcome, friends. Welcome back to the kitchen. Welcome back to Sunday morning in the Old Cookbook Show. This past week, or maybe 2 weeks ago, I got an email from a viewer in Scotland asking me if I could make Scottish tablet, or tablet, depending on your pronunciation. My Scottish grandmother said tablet. Just like she never said father, she always said father. Her particular accent, or Scottish accent, that's what it was. And so I thought, oh, I'm going to make that then. And I looked at my grandmother's recipe and then the recipe that this viewer sent and realized they're completely different. My grandmother was pretty old school. So I'm not going to make Scottish tablet. I'm going to do that in another episode because my grandmother's recipe is pre-1850, which is just cream and sugar, whereas in 2020, most tablet recipes call for condensed milk and butter and all kinds of other things. So I'm not going to wade into that just today. I'm going to make a Canadian version out of one of these Québécois cookbooks called Sucre à la crème, which is just sugar and cream. So I've got cream in here and I'm going to put it into a pot. The pot is on fairly low heat right now. I don't want to get it too hot too quickly. So in front of me I have two versions of La Cuisine Raisonnée, which is a very famous Québécois cookbook. This is the 1936 version. Looks very much like a hymn book or a Bible, and I think that's probably by design. And I also have the 1967 version, and the recipe is in both of these books. Pretty much exactly the same recipe, just the instructions in the 1967 version are much more precise and spell things out in a way that we would understand today, whereas the 1936 version assumes that you know a lot. And so this recipe for sucre à la crème can be found going right back to the first settlers in New France. So in with the cream, I'm putting in sugar, just plain old white sugar, which is pretty much exactly how it would have come to New France or Quebec from Old France in the beginning in the 1600s. But shortly after the settlers arrived, they would have started using maple syrup. So this recipe gets a healthy dose of maple syrup. Look at that. 2 cups of maple syrup, in fact. And now, for everyone screaming that maple syrup is really expensive, and in 1936, during the Depression, they wouldn't have had access or wouldn't have been able to afford maple syrup, in Quebec, in a rural setting, this maple syrup would have been way cheaper than white sugar, which is why it probably switched at some point to maple sugar, because it's available. It comes out of trees. So I'm going to put that in as well. Now at this point, I'm going to turn up the heat and I'm going to stir it until the sugars are dissolved into the cream. Once the sugars are dissolved, I'm not going to stir it anymore. If you want to make a concession to a modern day recipe and get your sugars to not crystallize and be much smoother, I would add some invert sugar in the form of corn syrup. 2 tablespoons of corn syrup will make that happen. Your sugar won't crystallize. You'll get a much smoother texture at the end. You could use any invert sugar, in fact. You don't have to use corn syrup, but corn syrup is a really readily available invert sugar. So I'm going to bring the temperature up. Recipe says I want to boil this to a softball stage. The 1967 recipe tells me that that temperature is 236 degrees Fahrenheit. So I am going to put a temperature probe in and keep careful watch on the temperature. Now, when this comes to a boil, watch it closely. Make sure you've got it in a big enough pot because it's going to bubble up, and this one might almost boil over. We're at 215 degrees Fahrenheit right now. And I think I've got it just right, although I'm ready to lift it off if I need to. I think we're going to be okay. So there we go. We're at 213 degrees Fahrenheit, and we need to get to 236. So the boiling took quite a while, a little bit longer than I thought to reach this temperature. I've set the alarm to go off at 235 so I don't miss 236. And I've been standing here looking at that beef in the dry ager, and it looks amazing. I think on the day that I'm making this, I've got about a week and a half until I can pull the first piece of beef out of that. Okay, 236. Off this comes from the heat. Now, the 1936 version of this recipe tells me just to let it cool a while. let it cool a while. It doesn't really tell you how long a while is or what the temperature is. The 1967 version, though, does tell me, don't stir this, don't touch it, don't do anything to it until the temperature drops to 110 degrees Fahrenheit. And that has to do with allowing the sugar and the crystal structure of the sugar to reach a point where when we start stirring it together, it's going to be smooth. So I'm going to let this sit here to 110. You could use a bain-marie in order to drop the temperature. My understanding is you don't want to drop the temperature too quickly, so don't use ice water, just use room temperature water if that's what you want to do. So now we just wait to the next step. And while we're waiting, this is the point where you would add flavorings if you want to. The 1936 version doesn't give you any indication about flavorings or nuts. The 1967 version does tell you that you can put in flavoring if you want. Doesn't say what kind of flavoring. I imagine vanilla would be the go-to. And nuts if you want them. It also says that you can add in a little bit of butter if you want to. I'm not going to do any of those things. I think the maple flavor all on its own should carry this. So we wait. Okay, we've reached the right temperature, so I'm going to pull out the temperature probe. Get as much of that back in as possible. Who am I kidding? That's really good. So now we mix it. And 1936, you would have used a wooden spoon. I'm going to use an electric mixer. Doesn't tell you how long to mix it. It gives you kind of a vague, it's going to change color and it's going to be less glossy. So my understanding is that it gets lighter in color and becomes kind of dull. I think I've reached the point where I've mixed it enough. It's the mixer's starting to strain a little bit, and the color has changed. It's lightened a touch, and it's also become a lot less glossy, almost dull. So I'm going to put this into a loaf pan, and I have buttered, greased the loaf pan, and then put a parchment sling in, so it's a little bit easier to get out later. So we'll pour this in. Get it all in there. And so I'm just going to let this cool until it hardens. And before it gets too hard, I'm going to score the top with this little knife so that it makes it easier to cut up later. Hey, Jules.
Hi, Glenn. Hello, friends.
Crème à la sucre from the La Cuisine Raisonnée.
Okay.
Um,
So we had this last week, but it was not like this at all.
didn't work out.
It was very soft.
Okay. Wow, that's sweet.
That was super sweet, but that's a much better texture than last week's.
Okay. Much
It's got
better
that kind
texture.
of crispy, fudgy
Yeah.
thing
So,
going.
What year was this? 26? 1936. So the 1936 version is very kind of minimalist in its instructions. The 1966 version gives temperatures, and it tells you to pull it off at 236 for softball stage.
Too soft.
Too soft. So on the first time at 236, I pulled it out, and it just,
Yeah, that was last week.
Flat
That was
rate.
last week's.
tastes amazing. Absolutely tastes amazing. But if you leave it out of the freezer, it just turns into a gooey mess.
I actually love this texture much better. The crystal formed of
Yeah,
formation
that
of the
sort of crystalline.
sugars.
So I would go higher. Softball is 235 to 240 degrees Fahrenheit.
Don't know. I have to look it up.
So if you go to like 238 or 239, you're going to get a better texture, that more crystalline, but still not crystally or hard.
Yes.
I would go much higher and make sure that your temperature probe isn't touching the bottom of the pot, because that'll throw your
Yes, it will.
that'll throw you off completely.
I could just eat
I
until it
know.
makes me sick.
Completely until it makes me sick. And they both give instructions of substitutions. This one says that you can do half cassonade or brown sugar
Okay.
and half white sugar and leave out the maple syrup. I know. Why would you leave out the maple syrup? That's just
Now that being said, it's not as easy to get hold of everywhere in the world.
not as easy everywhere. This book though is aimed firmly at Quebec.
Yes, of where it should be.
Probably, a mostly unknown book outside of Quebec, where maple syrup is much easier to get.
Tis true.
So if you want to do this, and then you could do it all with white sugar, and you've almost started to blur the line into Scottish tablet.
Yes.
In fact, it becomes a historical version of Scottish tablet. So
I'm curious how long it'll, not that I'll keep it very long because I'll eat it, but how long will it keep?
I think if you cut it up and put it in a sealed container and kept it in the fridge or the freezer, you could
Should keep for a while.
keep for a long time. The only way it'll go bad is if it starts to take on flavors from your fridge or your freezer.
Fair enough. Yeah.
So this is the kind of thing that if you wanted to make it for a holiday gift giving, you could probably do it 2 or 3 weeks in advance.
My concern is that as much as I want to eat it all right now,
That's
I
a
will
lot.
overwhelm myself, and eating it all before it goes blecky on the
Yeah.
counter and gets too warm
Yeah.
is not going to happen. There's just you and I eating these things right now.
So, would love to share this with you.
You'll have
Give
to
it a
try
try.
yourself.
Give it a try, and if you are one of our viewers in Quebec, let us know if your family makes this and how they make it. Thanks for stopping by. See you again soon.